All right. So I am going to record this and thank you guys for joining. Hopefully, more people will join in. But we're going to talk about hyperfocus because for a lot of people, it's a big problem. And for other people, they actually find ways to use it to their benefit. So it can also be considered a superpower. So, how would you guys define hyperfocus if you want to speak up? Or you can type in the chat box. Anyone? All right, I'm going to give you the answer. See, it's the May the 4th. Um, and some people fixate on lots of different things. Sometimes it is characters, sometimes it's Legos, sometimes it's games, reading, it can be anything, but it's an intense fixation on whatever you're interested in. And a lot of people mistake when kids have ADHD, they think there's no way they can possibly have ADHD because they can focus for hours watching a video or playing a game. But the reality is that some people do focus very long periods of time on things they like, but they have trouble regulating their focus for other things. People with ADHD are drawn to activities that give them instant feedback, gratification, things they really like. Um, and so this can lead to other problems or things not getting done, stuff like that. So Dr. Ed Hollowell is a psychiatrist who specializes in ADHD. He does a lot of national talks. He's written books. He has a big ADHD center. And he has said that ADHD is not a deficit of attention, but it's an abundance of attention, a wandering of attention, and a problems regulating it. And that makes sense. You know, you can focus on this, all these things, but nothing really well until you learn how to regulate it. People have strong attention to what captures their interest, but if they're not interested, their mind is on something else, which makes it hard because there's a lot of things in our lives that we aren't necessarily interested in, but we still have to do. Um, so the frontal lobes of your brain are important for motor function, problem solving, spontaneity, memory, language, initiation of things, judgment, impulse control, social behavior, lots of things. And interestingly enough, they tend to be the last part of your brain that develop anyway. And we know that kids with ADHD, it takes a little longer. So just like anything that's really worth the time, it does take a little bit longer. So a lot of kids with ADHD can seem behind their peers in a lot of these things. It takes them a little bit longer to learn the tasks, but the beauty is your brain is ever changing and you can still learn these things. And just a little bit more sciencey stuff about the brain. Of course, our brain is made up of lots and lots of little neurons, and the neurons need to talk to one another. So they shoot out these little messengers called neurotransmitters. There are some neurotransmitters that bring you up, some that bring you down, and you need both to kind of make a balance. Some can actually do both things, like dopamine is in both of those lists because it can be excitatory in some instances and it can also be inhibitory in others. So we need this balance, but we do know that in brains with ADHD, the balance is not it's not well balanced. So that can lead to problems with self-control, regulation, things with making decisions, all those executive functioning things that you do, organization, preparing to start a task, actually doing the task, finishing the task, that little brain or that self-talk that you have, using that to guide you can be more difficult without some of the balance of the neurotransmitters. So a lot of these things affect people with ADHD. So the excitatory neurotransmitters, the things that help your brain like stay on task and regulate anxiety, motor skills, all kinds of things. They help us stay alert. And when they're not regulated with the things that help bring it down, they can get out of control. And so if you are alert to something and you don't have that inhibitory neurotransmitter to help pull it back, it's really hard to get out of that alertness. And again, Dr. Ed Hollowell said that ADHD is like having a Ferrari, you know, this big, expensive, super fast sports car. It's excellent car, but it gets bicycle brakes. And so if you strengthen the brakes, you have a champion, you have a great car. But if you're just using those bicycle brakes, it's not going to be sufficient. So people with ADHD have great brains. They just don't know how to use them and balance what they need very well. So the inhibitory neurotransmitters act like the brakes. We need the brakes, so we're less restless, irritable, we can focus better. And when our brakes work, we can do great, but without the brakes, we're kind of out of control. And just kind of a note, a lot of people with ADHD, even more so than other people, have a really hard time with things that are on a screen because social media, movies, video games, all those things that give you that instant gratification. Um, and I guarantee companies pay money for psychologists to do research on what gets people's attention, what can keep them another minute longer, watching another video, playing another level, doing whatever. Um, they pay to get people to learn how to make these games develop so that they are even more attractive to our brains. And so even people without problems with the neurotransmitter regulation can have problems, but people with ADHD have even more problems with it. So you guys are going to have to be really careful to moderate your time using any of those things that can really get your hyperfocus going. All right, so when neurotransmitter levels are too high or too low, you can have issues with task initiation, anxiety, any of the executive functioning things. And we're all responsible for ourselves. We can help control our actions. We're all responsible for our actions. So you have to learn to train your brain instead of impulsively yelling at somebody or acting out or not doing something. We have to learn to control that. Um, and sometimes it's hard. It can be helped with some of the medications that help balance those neurotransmitters. But even if those medications wear off at the end of the day, like stimulants do, um, we are all still responsible for our actions. So with time and practice, you can learn the skills that can help you to regulate some of these things. Because you can have the feelings, those you own, but it's important to learn how to react to those feelings in ways that are healthy for you and for others around you. All right, so the medications definitely help. We can't just make the symptoms go away, and they don't fix the ADHD, but they help balance the regulation of the neurotransmitters while the medicines are working. Unfortunately, a lot of the ADHD medicines wear off either after 3 to 4 hours or 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, depending on the medication and the person. Um, so they're an important tool, but you also need to learn other things. Take care of your body. Getting exercise helps to regulate things. Getting enough sleep is huge because when we're sleep deprived, nobody can focus, nobody can regulate their emotions as well. Um, Sleep deprivation is really, really difficult for people with ADHD. And then, of course, eating healthy also helps, and that can be impacted by medication. So making sure that you eat at times that the medicine isn't affecting your appetite as much can be really important. All right, so hyperfocus can be great because if you're getting something done that you need to do, it can be fabulous. But it can be hard if you can't stop and make the transition to the next thing. Um, so if you think, oh, I'm just going to watch one little quick video, and before you know it, you've watched 12 quick videos and it's been several hours. So it keeps you from doing the things you need to do. Some people get stuck in a problem. You know, you're working on that math problem and you just think, I just got to finish this one problem. It's making me so mad. I got to get it done. Got to do it. And you can't move to the next thing because you're stuck on that one thing. Whereas if you would take a break from that one problem, come back to it refreshed later, it might be easier because you can see it from a fresh perspective at that time. But a lot of people get stuck on that moment and they can't make that transition out of it. Um, and of course, then too, it can keep you from doing the less desired tasks if you're doing something that you want to do. Um, so then it helps you procrastinate to not do something that you don't want to do. So that can be a big problem. And then again, with the neurotransmitters, dopamine is one of those neurotransmitters that can make it hard to stop because it makes you feel good when you get dopamine. You get a dopamine hit when you win a game. You get a dopamine hit if you eat something that you really enjoy. You get a dopamine hit if you um, do whatever that you enjoy doing. And so people with ADHD tend to have lower dopamine levels. So you crave that dopamine. You want that good feeling. So it's really hard to stop the things that make you feel good. And that's even more of an issue with people who have lower dopamine. All right, so if you have hyperfocus, you need to learn when to stop it, when to use the cues, or enlist other people to help you with things so that you can stop. And one of the biggest things we talked about several months ago, organizational tips, is having a detailed plan. Every hour can have something in it. Now, some of these things are going to be like waking up and going back to bed. Eating needs to be in there, school, work, chores, homework, all those things need to be there, but you also need to schedule downtime. It's huge to put that in there because if you don't schedule it, if you're just back to back to back to back to back tasks that you have to do, it's going to be overwhelming and crazy and you're going to get exhausted. So you do need to put those downtimes in there. And depending on what the downtime is, if it's something that you tend to hyper focus on, you have to be really careful to make sure that there's a way to get out of that downtime. Um, every day it's really important to get in the habit at the morning time, look at your calendar for the day, see what you have in store. At the end of the day, look at the next day. At least once a week, look ahead for the whole week. And then a couple times a month, at least look at the whole month so you can kind of reorganize and readdress things if they need to happen. Um, and it always is helpful if you schedule things that you don't like to do before the things that you do like to do, because you can use that thing that you do like to do, you're looking forward to later, as one of those like rewards for finishing the thing that you don't like to do. So if you like math homework, but you don't like reading, do the reading first. So you can say, when I'm finished with whatever I need to read, I can do math and I like that better. Or more realistically, it would be something that you really, really enjoy, like, I don't know, some sort of dance, sport, art, video games, watching videos, whatever it is. But do the required thing first so that you can look forward to something in the future. Um, and then, of course, using tools, not these kind of tools that are shown in the picture, but um, there are tools in your phone or your whatever tablet you're using device to restrict times that you can use. And I know a lot of kids are mad because their parents insist on having these little blocks in there so you can't access certain programs or certain apps at certain times of the day. But if you do this to yourself, it actually shows a sign of maturity and a desire to want to succeed and do the best you can do. And if you know that your weakness is checking to see if any friends have messaged you or sent something on an app or playing a game, make it so that you can't do that at that time, because that can help you get your other tasks done and not use that hyper focus item as a procrastinating device. Setting alarms or notifications can help, so that if you know that you have to work on this right now, but then you have to be finished with this at a certain time so that you can start the next whatever it is, set notifications or alarms. And if you know that you tend to ignore those things, then enlist a friend or family member to actually physically get you. I know some adults that get so hyper focused on their work that they will have a coworker come get them for meetings because they forget to go to the meeting that's just down the hall because they're so engrossed in their work. So it can happen to kids too. You guys just need to ask for help for people to get you out of that focus zone. Um, again, looking at your calendar regularly, adapting it and changing it if needed. Um, a couple of years ago, we had a whole talk on backward planning. An ADHD coach locally came, and it was actually really cool. It was one of my favorite meetings that we had when we were back in person. It was making cookies, and we went to a place that actually had a kitchen so we could make cookies, and you had to plan backwards from, your desired outcome was the cookie, and you had to plan all the steps of making it, mixing it, cooking it, all of that, all the way back to getting the ingredients that you needed. And backward planning is really helpful for a lot of people who need to see that end product first. That might be a good talk in the future to have again some point, because it's a huge topic in and of itself. But again, tapping into the reward to motivate you, because you need that dopamine, you need that like something to feel good about. And that's where looking at the end product first can help with some people, but also finding other rewards, even if it's just that you get to do something else when you finish this task. But you can maybe, if you hate writing papers, but think about the last time you wrote a paper and you actually did a really good job on it and got praise for it. Things like that, you can tap into that reward to try to make you feel better about doing it and try to motivate it. And then, of course, asking friends and family to help break your hyperfocus. And this actually can be really hard. I know for years, my poor daughter would just throw fits when I would try to call her for dinner sometimes. And I couldn't figure out why. Sometimes she would just lose it because I would call her for dinner. And when she finally got old enough to express what she was going through, in her mind, she just needed like 5 more minutes or so to finish whatever she was doing. And it took her so long to get into the zone to be able to do this homework that she didn't want to do. She didn't intrinsically like that subject. But if she got into the zone and she was powering it out, she did not want to be interrupted. And if I interrupted that focus, it would just totally wig her out. And it would be really hard for her to get back into the focus. And she knew that. She knew that she wouldn't be able to get back into that focus. And whereas she only had a couple more minutes left, a couple more problems or whatever she had to do, but to get back into the zone and everything would take a long time. So she would get so frustrated with that, and she couldn't express that when she was younger. So I would encourage you guys to talk to your parents if you tend to hyperfocus and you lose it when they ask you to do things. Maybe have them watch this. I will record this and send it out to parents if you want. Um, but let them know, maybe some tips. I mean, things we talked about were putting a sign on the back of her chair or on her door, depending on where she was studying. So like a do not disturb sign. And she couldn't abuse it. She couldn't use it if she was watching a video, but she could totally use it if she was doing homework or something that she knew that she was going to try to finish before she would be disturbed. I could text her and I knew that she wouldn't respond right away. I know a lot of parents get very upset when their kids don't respond immediately, but if she had her notifications off so that she could stay in the zone when she was doing that undesirable task and not be disturbed, I had to respect that. So, every once in a while she was supposed to check her phone just to make sure that nothing emergent was happening. And certainly if the house was on fire, I would go get her. But if she was late to dinner, I had to learn to get over that. I still think dinner is a very important thing. And she would try to plan her schedule to be done by whatever time we were going to have dinner. But sometimes getting that homework done was just so much more important, especially since the time of homework was usually after her medications were out of her system. So we just had to work with that. And it was really enlightening when she was able to express that to me. So if you guys struggle with that at your home, please talk to your parents as much as you can about that. And if they don't understand it, send them my way and I can try to explain it a little bit. All right, so one of the really cool things about hyperfocus is a lot of people as they get older can learn how to use it to their benefit. Um, when little kids hyperfocus, it tends to be on Legos or video games or things like that. But as people get older, they find interests that they actually could use lifelong in a skill for a job or a creative art or something like that. And if you hyperfocus on that, it can be very good in your career. Now, it still could cause problems. If you're hyper focusing at work and you forget to go home, it's not going to be good for your family life. So there are things that you still have to learn how to restrain. And again, that give and take, learning how to not just have that excitatory stuff, but still have the inhibitory aspects of it. It tends to get easier to learn to do this as you get older, because naturally you think about when you're in grade school, every kid has to do everything the same. As you get into middle school, you get one or two electives that might be a choice that you like, still pretty limited. High school, you get a few more electives. By the time you're in college or getting into a career, you're focusing on the things you like anyway, because that's what your job is or that's what you're studying. So it gets easier just naturally because you're pulled more towards having to do things that you enjoy doing more. But even now, if you identify the things that you like to do, the things that you tend to hyper focus on, kind of think about what happens in your brain when you're doing that, recognizing when you're in that zone and how you get out of it, because that's important as well. And then because it is hard to get out of it, you don't want to start any of those hyper focus activities right before bed or right before you need to do something. If you need to leave the house at 4 o'clock to get to an important appointment or sport or whatever, you don't want to start something that you're going to hyper focus on, lose track of time, and end up being late to that. So plan your hyper focus periods for when you can most use them to your advantage. And then try to make those less desirable tasks stimulating. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit, but you got to find that carrot, something that will grab your attention and make you want to do it. And then just be careful when doing your favorite activities and figure out how you're going to get out of it, whether you're going to have a parent come get you at a certain time, have an alarm or notification that you're not going to ignore, or that you can turn off and then go to do something else, have transition time where you physically move into a different location, get up and walk around between things. That can help reset your brain and transition. But you need to learn to break that trance when you're in that zone. And it can't be okay to yell at people or react that way. You have to learn to train yourself to have those transitions in a healthy way. One of the ways you can do that is mindfulness. And I know when we've talked about mindfulness before, because it helps with so many things, people usually roll their eyes. They say they can't do it. It's too hard. And it isn't easy. I will give you that. It does take practice. It does take time, but it's just basically learning how to be aware of you, feeling your breathing, feeling your heart rate, noticing the way the clothes feel on your body, the way the chair back and seat are feeling on my body, the smells that I might smell, the sounds that I might be hearing, just very aware of everything around me without any thoughts of things that are good or bad, just aware. And that awareness, if you practice doing that, you can actually learn how to control a lot of your emotions and regulate um, all of that a little easier. So it can help get in and out of the hyperfocus if you learn to be very mindful. And then if you're going to start an activity that's going to cause hyperfocus, set a milestone to stop. So if you're going to watch videos for a little bit, maybe 2 videos or 3 videos, depending on how long they are, or if you're going to play a game, when you finish this level, you've got to move on to the next thing, or set a time. If you're going to read, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long you're going to do. And when you meet that milestone, you have to quit, even if you're really enjoying what you're doing. You got to figure out how to get it to stop. And again, getting up, moving around, changing the scenery, have another person physically come get you. All of those things can help. All right, so how do you make it more stimulating? If something that you really don't want to do, how do you make it to where it stimulates you? And this is something that, depending on what you enjoy, there are lots of things that you could do. You can put facts into a song. You guys might be too young to have ever watched Hannah Montana, but I know she had to memorize a list of something and she put it into a song. I still remember that. And that's not for everybody, but if you enjoy singing and you're creative that way, you can totally put lyrics to something. Or a lot of times you can find songs on YouTube or something even where different things, mnemonics, things like that. I know I got through a lot of school with mnemonics. Something like every good boy does fine if you have to learn music. That's a common one that people know. And I remember that from childhood. I wouldn't remember otherwise where the song things go because I'm not a music person, but I still remember that because somehow those little mnemonic things or songs stick in your head. I can sing a song that I hadn't heard in 10 years, 20 years easily, but I can't remember things that somebody told me this morning. So music helps. Watching a factual movie on something can make it more interesting. If you hate history, watch a movie or read a book that's like historical fiction to kind of get into the zone of that period in time, and that will help you remember the dates and things more. Play a game. Math is easy for this. There's lots of math games that can help make the learning more fun and intriguing for you because you actually win, you do things, you can see the change. And then again, as you move up in your education, the classes become more what you like, so it can get easier. I think that is my last slide.